what I want to do is I want to raise a topic about the Dao. I mean, personally for me, Dao De Jing has been just the deepest thing that I've encountered in the Chinese corpus by far. And that's just my personal, impact of it, and would love to hear your thoughts about the Dao. Now, what I want, more specifically, these cultures, whether when we study China or when we study India, or even when we study something of the past, like the Gospel of John that we study, what happens is that there is some idea that really hits you, that really transforms the way you think about everything. And from the Chinese corpus, if I have to pick one idea, for me, it is definitely the idea of the Dao. And so I would love to hear from anybody who cares to speak. What has this idea done for you? I know that many of us here have spent time with that idea, and would love to hear what anybody has to say about that. So go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you would like to talk about the Dao and what it has done for you.
By the way, fun fact, the U.S. Military Academy still teaches this book to this day.
Thank you, Peter. All right, so on the Dao, anybody would like to talk about the Dao? What has the study of Dao done for you? We'll start with, let's start with Mike, Mark, and then Joe. Mike.
Yeah, there's so much that I wouldn't really know where to choose or where to start. So I'll just pick one that over the years, I found the Tao to almost create a mirror for me at any time, in that if you look at the Yang in Korean or the yin yang sign, it's constantly reflecting back to you the other side of something. This is just how I see it. So if I'm trying to do something physical, or if I'm reading a book that's hard, or even in conversation with people, what it's done for me over all these years of studying the Tao and trying to understand it is when I'm confused, it just eventually, it's almost like there's this mirror that pops up and it shows me the other side of something. So it's almost embellishing or manifesting that yin yang sign in real time. And I had the deepest experience studying it with a Korean Taekwondo master who constantly told me physically, for example, if I was going to throw a punch with my right hand, that it really starts with my left, kind of creating torque. If I was going to kick with my right leg, it's really balancing on the left leg first. So that was a physical manifestation. And even in conversations, the more you study the Tao, you tend to have this friend on your shoulder that eventually just kind of mirrors what the person on the other side is saying. So, and also it's not static, it actually revolves. So you may find yourself at some point really inside the other person's thought process, where if you don't have experience with the Tao, if you kind of look at things from your perspective only, it's very easy to stay locked into one side. So over the years, I've found it to be a friend and a way to kind of almost present the other side in a very natural way.
Wonderful. So folks, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to have conversations with people as they are making these observations, because Mike, this is a fantastic observation. I've never really thought of it quite this way, saying that it reflects back to you the other side. Because what happens is that in the Western world, Western way of thinking, we are focused on using the terminology of Gestalt psychology. We are focused on the figure, we are focused on things that are there, that you're conscious of, that you're fully invested in. and you're not really aware of the ground. But the ground is very real, and ground is the context in which the figure is operating. What Dao reminds you is that no matter what name you're using or which one of the 10,000 things you're focused on, there is the larger Dao within which it is taking place. And the yin yang connection, I think, is beautiful because it is, I mean, in one sense, the Tao is reminding you that there are these universal principles with tremendous potentiality and tremendous fecundity that are around whatever it is that you're doing or seeing. And do not forget those. So at a kind of a, percept to concept level, that is going on. But as you're correctly pointing out, the other aspect of it, it is saying that you're focused on this, but there is this other thing, which is part of the whole equation. And, it's kind of reflecting back on that. So that's just beautifully put. Thank you. Thank you so much. Next up is going to be Mark, followed by Joe. And if anybody else would like to talk about the Tao, would really be grateful. Mark, go ahead.
Okay, I really loved also hearing that earlier comment. Shrikant, I was wondering about your intro, and one of the things you said most was the idea of the Tao. And I'm wondering if there is an idea of the Tao, or if we mean by idea being able to form a concept. If we can't do that for the Tao, then can there be an idea for the Tao? That was my question.
Sure. A wonderful, wonderful question. I was, obviously, Dao Ke Dao, Fei Chang Dao, right? Ming Ke Ming, Fei Chang Ming. So it is, Dao that can be named is not the real Dao. So there is no real name for the Dao. I was giving that intro in the context of the way in which the West thinks about ideas. So what I was saying was that different cultures have different ideas. So India has certain ideas. China has certain ideas. For example, China has the idea of balance, for example, which is the heart of the dance of yin yang. Similarly, there is this concept of Tao, or there is the Tao. So I was looking at it in the context of like history of ideas, of trying to refer to ideas. But you're right, Tao, all you can say is it just is. It just is. It's a name. With names, you're trying to refer to something. In terms of how do you use names to refer to this, I've compared the tradition of Tao, the Bhagavad Gita, the Indian tradition of using names, and the word in Bible together in a recent video that I've done on metaphors. So I would recommend that. So in that sense, I'm using the Western and Indian way of referring to the Tao. But excellent question. Thank you. Thank you so much. Next up is going to be Joe. Wait a minute. Mark, did you have a follow-up? Okay. Go ahead, Joe.
So I just look at this in terms of like kind of how all these philosophies have actually benefited me in one way, shape, or form. And I look at the Tao as, let me start with actually Stoicism. Stoicism cares, it uses logic, and it cares about the natural order, of things. Or the order of nature, I should say, rather. Whereas the Tao actually cares about the natural order of things. And that distinction is very important, because, one looks at nature and actually looks at nature and tries to be one with nature, and tries to flow, just be like water. And there's a certain degree of compassion and tranquility that comes along with that. There's a certain degree of tranquility and that comes along with Stoicism as well, but it follows principles. And so it's a little bit different in that sense. It follows very strict principles and some deductive logic. And that's a different way of approaching the world. So when we read the Tao, when we have our Friday nights and we're reading the Tao, what I get out of it is it kind of is has a calming effect. And it really feels like you're communing with the text, and you really are more in touch with the natural world than you would be if you were looking at it strictly from a philosophical, when I'm saying philosophical Stoic perspective. So one is used in the world, in a practical sense, but one is also complementing you. It kind of brings you back to a almost spiritual experience, and also it helps you understand how nature works, and how you can flow within nature. So that would be my way of describing how the Tao has actually been beneficial in it. Reading it in the morning or just listening to it is also very soothing. So I think that it gives you a lot of different insights.
Thank you. I'll comment I'll say a few things about it. Would love to hear if anybody else has things to add. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark. So I love this contrasting between Stoicism and Taoism. And I agree with you, because what happens is that Tao, it's like it just focuses on the core issue of saying it is, the nature is what it is, the world is what it is. Never forget that, always keep returning to that, and you will be fine. Don't get hung up on things that you're made, the words you're using. Keep returning, it's a question of kind of almost an eternal return to the baseline. What happened, and this, I find it particularly important in our current civilization, because we have such a large civilization, large and complex civilization, and we get caught up into the complexities of our thought, our habits, our actions, our social interaction, all of that, our emotions. And this is a reminder of us, a reminder. Tao is a very gentle and powerful reminder to kind of go back to the root, using the Tao term, going back to the root. Western philosophies like Stoicism, the beautiful thing is that I love Stoicism as well, but there is a lot more focus on the civilization part. How do you actually conduct yourself? And how do you conduct yourself in a variety of situations? All of that. And there is even the method of doing that is dramatically different. The method in China, again, I'm not a scholar of this, but the method is almost perceptual in case of, or experiential in case of the Tao. It is not intellectual, it is not logical, you're not coming up with arguments. You are simply saying it is. And it's profoundly grounding as a base point. So I find that even when I really like everything in the West, like, for example, what we're studying in the Gospel of John. There is a lot of great stuff in Aristotle, Stoicism. I find that using Tao as a base for it, and then doing that on the top is much more effective, because otherwise you get too caught up into your own thinking about, this balance between culture and nature. You kind of become more culture focused and not enough nature focused. So I think that's what I get from it. Joe, you had a follow. Go ahead.
And I said deductive logic in the sense that Stoicism is really always coming back to facts. When you're thinking about things and you're really kind of analyzing the world. And so, because it's coming back to this idea of rationality, right? What's rational? What's rational is based on what's factual. And when I look at the Tao, it's kind of saying, it's more of almost an inductive way of looking at the world, where you're observing it and you're making an inference from that observation, and you're just going along with it. So the idea that how nature works, you're just not necessarily pulling it apart with what you're calling facts. You're actually just communing with nature in a sense, and you're in touch with nature. So I don't want to say, so it's not so far as one's inductive, they both, but Stoicism is both inductive and deductive, but I feel like one is more inductive and the other one's more deductive, and so that they complement one another, I think, in a very nice way. And I think that that's my comment.
Yeah, I think the way I think about it, I do love the emphasis on word in both the Indian context and the Western context. And what we found, what we've seen in Bhagavad Gita or the Gospel of John, is that the word as described, the conceptualization, explication as described in the Gospel of John or Bhagavad Gita remains connected to the Tao, remains connected to the natural principles. There is this tremendous acceptance of what is. So in its own way, there is a way. It is trying to refer to the same thing as the Tao. When you're talking about, God the Father, or you're thinking about the Brahma, it is the same kind of a thing. But on the top of that, there are words. I think the reason Tao is particularly appealing to me and to, I think, many of us, is that in modern times, we have lost touch with that. We have lost touch that was there in the old Indian context or the old context in the West. It was much more connected to the whole. And we've kind of become more analytical. We've become more application oriented. We are more focused on transforming of the world. And we've been very, very effective at that. And that's great. But in the process, I think this connection with nature, with natural law, and just this simple thing saying it is, and being open to what is, even though it is much, 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 much larger than what we can talk about or conceptualize, or what is in our philosophy. It is much larger. So saying, having that kind of a humility, I think is a profoundly corrective experience in the context of our modern experience. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Marco. Anybody else wants to say anything, please go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Marco.
Yeah, for me, the notion non-action, just some heat of the moment and you're sort of feel active. Really to remember that and uh, jump to conclusions, and also the notion waiting until the settles, water is clear, and that's another also tech, another note like that's been helpful from the.
Marco, I don't think I heard you fully, but I will comment on what I heard. So what happens is that we tend to be very reactive. We tend to kind of respond to things that are going on. We have, very dramatic reactions to that, and we are mostly operating in a reactive fashion. What the Tao invites us to do in a very gentle way is to be open to everything that is going on. And what it does is that it gives you peace. It gives you this profound serenity and peace, so that it's like, the idea of the valley. You're going back to the base. You're going back to the root. You're letting the water flow down to the base, and that place psychologically has peace and serenity, and that's what makes it, it makes it profoundly rejuvenating. It's like, kind of life kind of seeps through. It really, what shall I say? It is healing. It is the quietude. I mean, you feel that when you are out in the nature, when you're hearing, the ocean, when you are in the mountains, when you are in the forest, because you feel that, because your senses are picking up all the natural movements. We live in a world which we have made, and it has the same characteristics as our characteristics. All the limitations, all the, we have built that around us, and that's what it feels like. So it is just like, so experiencing Tao is going to the nature, and going to nature by just reading it, or reciting it. So thank you. Thank you, Marco. Next up is Mike, followed by Laura. Mike.
As you were talking, you were making my point for me. I was looking at Paul's background and Mark's background as you were talking about getting back to nature, and I was just thinking, I'll just use Paul's as the example. And also get back to your point earlier about being in an application world that we're in. So without Zoom, we're not communicating now. So there's obviously a tremendous benefit for having this application. However, looking at Paul's background, if I were Paul in that picture, the sound, like he could put an audio of what the ocean sounds like, but it's not the same as if I were standing there, right? And there's no tactile sensation being on Zoom, except for me touching this mouse or me picking up my glass. So I think, again, when you're studying the Tao and you can get yourself out there physically, you will heighten your five senses, or at least revive them, because I think digitally sometimes they can become dull, especially smell. I mean, I can't smell anything outside of what's in my room, but if I were in or next to that ocean, it would be a very, very different experience. So I think that's another positive of studying the Tao and getting back to nature. You can heighten those senses.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. Laura, you're next. Laura, you need to unmute. Go ahead.
I don't know. I feel like when I read the Tao, the world is big, but he allows me to touch one small spot, and look at that small spot in relation to some maybe larger spot. And I don't know, it lets me feel and understand things better when I can look at that from his vantage point. You know, I don't have to look at everything, the large, the big, understand everything. But if I can understand maybe how the wind blows and how, you know, it affects the weather, the tree, I can understand when the rain comes down, what happens. And, you know, when the rain goes away, I can understand. So I can understand these bits in time, makes it easier for me to understand the world around me sometimes. And, you know, as you read through the passages of the Tao, it becomes, you know, you get to see the whole picture over time. And he builds it for you in a way that you can comprehend it, which sometimes you can't otherwise.
Thank you.
How I feel about it.
Thank you, Laura. That was beautiful. I mean, see, that's the beauty. One of the beauties of the Tao, that it can be talking about something very, very simple, a very simple experience, and the way it does it, it's allows you to kind of freshly experience it almost. So it is like, and that it's like discovering not just that leaf or that stream, but also of you being conscious of it, you encountering it almost fresh, you know, freshly. So what happens is that, again, we get jaded, you know, we get used to doing things and they become habitual to us, both our actions, our emotions, our thought. What Tao does for me, and I think for many people, is to step back, take a deep breath, and experience everyday things afresh. So it is a profound, it is a very simple thing. And the beauty of it is its gentleness, you know, of just, and it is, you know, again, I'm used the term, it is rejuvenating. It is like saying, oh, this is how things smell, you know, this is how things feel. And it is very sensory, and it allows you with the senses to encounter nature afresh. Joe.
You know, you used the right word. It's gentle. And I think where it's gentle is, it's amazing how it'll teach you about leadership and the world without you even knowing. It's not teaching you, like, it's not telling you anything. It's just teaching you. The idea of, like, the one, I forget which one it's number, I think it's number 9, where the people say, we did it. And, you know, that's what a true leader is. It's in the background. Well, that's what leadership really is about. Now, put yourself in the shoes of somebody that's running a company and thinks they have to control everything and thinks that they have to do, and you read that in a very gentle way, it brings you back to what real leadership would be. But it teaches you so much more beyond that too. It talks about what a country is in certain passages. And if you even look at Tao 81, I think that's an excellent one, is like, you know, truthful words are not beautiful. You know, that beautiful words are not truthful. Now, if you think about that, is extremely profound. You know, in a way, I can make an argument that, let's just say you're in ancient Greece, the sophists would be like, you know, people that speak beautifully, but that was not necessarily truthful. And they were just trying to win the argument. But truthful words maybe not beautiful in certain cases. Like, that somebody is expressing themselves. I always say this in general, people that express themselves, honestly, they say things that you probably don't want to hear. But if you said it just by reading this passage, you would understand sometimes that truthful words aren't always beautiful, and that you wouldn't necessarily get upset. And it's just but it's telling you a profound message in such a gentle way. And so I think that that's what the Tao does throughout the text. It's really things that the sage does. The one more he gives to others, the greater his abundance. Right? It's a profound principle, and it's being communicated in a sense that, in a very, very natural way. So anyway, I would just say, I just leave it at that.
Thank you, Joe. Marcos spoke about, no action, acting without acting. I think it connects very beautifully with what you said here. Because what happens is that we have preconceptions of what we need to do and how we need to do it. And what the Tao is doing in terms of human relations is that it is saying, actually pay attention to the person, actually see what is going on with them, and act in line with that, and then it'll be fine. It seems like a very simple advice. But it is the same kind of advice. It's like looking at, just like it is saying, look at nature, look at water. It's saying, look at people. And just like, flow like water, just deal with people by understanding their own nature and act with that, instead of having preconceptions and saying, oh, I need to put this person there, against their own nature. Hey, go ahead, Joe.
Just and comparing and contrasting that with Stoicism, right? Stoicism has all of these like kind of approaches, like dichotomy of control. Mm-hmm. And so you're breaking it down. This is somehow communicating some of the same things without saying this is the rule of what you need to follow. And then Epictetus would call it the fundamental rule. Mm-hmm. So, it's not I'm just reading this and you'll infer. And that's where I get back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, is that, it's more inductive, where you just make an inference based on your observations, and versus this idea of using the facts and this logic, which is very valuable in this rational side of the mind, that is saying, oh, this is outside my control. But there's a rule associated with it. So anyway, I think that the comparing and contrasting them and having them both is important. One, you're out in the world and you need it. One, you need to come back to.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. So we'll take one more comment, and then I invite you to read one of your favorite verses from Dao De Jing. So Laura.
Well, I was going to suggest verse 22. I really like.
Would you like to read it? Go ahead.
Sure. Just give me a second here, and I'll pull it up.
You can pull it up. Let me know.
Got it.
You have it? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, put my glasses on, because otherwise it's useless. Sure. All right. Okay. It reads that if you want to become whole, let yourself be partial. If you want to be straight, let yourself be crooked. If you want to become full, let yourself be empty. If you want to be reborn, let yourself die. If you want to be given everything, give everything up. The master, by residing in the Tao, sets an example for all beings. Because he doesn't display himself, people can see his light. Because he has nothing to prove, people can trust his words. Because he doesn't know who he is, people can recognize themselves in him. Because he has no goal in mind, everything he does succeeds. When the ancient master says, if you want to be given everything, give everything up, there wasn't, and they weren't using empty phrases. Only in the beginning, lived by the Tao, can you truly be yourself.
Thank you.
Not sure the sentence right, but okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let's, anybody else wants to read their favorite? Joe, go ahead.
I read this the other night. Would that be cheating?
That's fine. You can read it. You have to read it 10,000 times. That's
Oh,
the
good. All right. Well, then I'm going to read 17, the one I just referenced, because it is my favorite. The very highest, if barely known, then comes that which people know and love, then that which is feared, then that which is despised. Who does not trust enough will not be trusted. When actions are performed without unnecessary speech, people say, we did it.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to read? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark. I invite you to read. This is the best way of focusing on the Tao. I'm going to read number 20. How much difference between yes and no? What difference between good and bad? What the people fear must be feared. Oh, desolation. Not yet. Not yet has it reached its limit. Everybody is cheerful as if at a party or climbing a tower in springtime. And here I sit, unmoved, clueless, like a child, a baby too young to smile, forlorn, like a homeless person. Most people have plenty. I'm the one that's poor, a fool right through, ignorant. Most people are so bright. I'm the one that's dull. Most people are so keen. I don't have the answers. Oh, I'm desolate, at sea, adrift, without harbor. Everybody has something to do. I'm the clumsy one, out of place. I'm the different one. For my food is the milk of the mother. Right? Does anybody else want to read anything? Right? Let's see. Mike, go ahead.
Okay, this is verse 11. 30 spokes converge upon a single hub. It is on the hole in the center that the use of the cart hinges. Shape clay into a vessel. It is the space within that makes the vessel useful. Carve fine doors and windows, but the room is useful in its emptiness. The usefulness of what is depends on what is not.
Wonderful. I'm going to read number 16. Wait a minute, Joe, you have something. Go ahead. You're welcome to read. Anybody who wants to
Yeah, you can read first, because that was the one actually I was going to read Mike's, but yeah.
Okay, sure. I'm going to read number 16. Returning to the root. Be completely empty. Be perfectly serene. The 10,000 things arise together. In their arising is their return. Now they flower, and flowering sink homeward, returning to the root. The return to the root is peace. Peace to accept what must be, to know what endures. In that knowledge is wisdom. Without it, ruin, disorder. To know what endures is to be open-hearted, magnanimous, regal, blessed, following the Tao, the way that endures forever. The body comes to its ending, but there is nothing to fear. All right, so folks, go ahead, Joe.
So I do like 81.
Go ahead.
Truthful words are not beautiful. Beautiful words are not truthful. Good men do not argue. Those who argue are not good. Those who know are not learned. The learned do not know. The sage never tries to stir things up. Sorry. No, store things up. The more he does for others, the more he has. The more he gives to others, the greater his abundance. The Tao of heaven is pointed at, but it does no harm. The Tao of the sage is work without effort.
All right, I'm going to end the meetup with this, my favorite one from the Tao, number 25, which summarizes everything for me. There is something that contains everything. Before heaven and earth it is. Oh, it is still, unbodied, all on its own, unchanging, all pervading, ever moving. So it can act as the mother of all things. Not knowing its real name, we only call it the Tao. If it must be named, let its name be great. Greatness means going on. Going on means going far. And going far means turning back. So they say, the Tao is great. Heaven is great. Earth is great. And humankind is great. 4 greatnesses in the world, and humanity is one of them. People follow the earth. Earth follows the heaven. Heaven follows the Tao, and the Tao follows what is. All right, so on that note, thank you very much, everybody. Just wonderful to have you. Good night. Bye.